Hello, I am Jessie, the sleepy koala, and I am Australian and tired, and joining me today is my husband, Eric.
Hello, I am also tired, but not Australian.
Today, we are going to do the Philosophy of Reading tag, which is a new tag created by Brandon from Brandon's Bookshelf. It is really interesting, and I actually was watching somebody's, I can't remember whose, video of it earlier today, and they likened it to the booktube newbie tag. And I think that was a great comparison because this would work really well as the booktube newbie tag as well. So
just telling about like what you do and why.
Yeah,
and
like how you read and why you read. And there's some really great questions in this.
And I've done no preparation whatsoever.
Well, that's the whole point of a tag video, is you go in without thinking about it because you don't have to do prep.
Okay, great.
Unless you're me, who gets anxious about things and has to go.
And you plan before we go to the restaurant about what you're going to buy.
Look, it just makes it simpler, okay?
I don't doubt that.
I don't do that anymore.
That's true.
Much. I do that sometimes.
The philosophy of going out to eat. Welcome to this.
Look, it's helpful because we live on the coast and I don't eat pretty much any seafood but salmon.
So it's like, salmon.
So we go to so it's so easy if we just go to a seafood restaurant. I'm like, well, I'm either getting the non-seafood thing or the salmon. Those are my choices. That makes it so much easier.
It's true.
It's like, I have like friends who are vegetarian and they say how they go to places and there's one or two vegetarian options. They could just bypass everything else. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if they had more options, whereas I'm fine with my few choices.
Right. Well, with that diversion done, let's talk about books.
Anyway, into the tag. Question number 1. What's most important? A good character, plot, or message?
Ooh, that's a good question. So for me, it's between character and plot. I think character and plot are very important to me. Message, I wouldn't rate super highly, though if you have a good message along with those other things, that can really resonate and make like a good book into like, wow, that really meant a lot to me, right? But, I think I'm a very plot-centric reader. If I'm not like hooked by something, I'm just out. And like, if you have a good ending, that like, great, the book's great. If it's a crap ending, I'm like, the book's terrible. Now, a character is very important. So like, those are pretty close together. But I'm here for the plot.
Whereas I'm here for the characters.
You are.
Like, you could have the best plot in the world. If I'm not resonating with the characters, it's just not going to work very well. Yeah. I need to have a good character to latch onto. Even if it's just one, there can be one character that I latch onto, but as long as there's one, then I'm fine getting through things. But otherwise, whereas like I've read books where the Chain of Iron is by Cassandra Claris, a great example of this. I think the first half of that book is just a character study and a relationship study. There is like so little plot happening, but I love it because the characters are so good. So I can totally do a book that has so little plot and is all just character based, like really easily do that. But if you have a book that has characters that I just don't resonate with, can't do it. And like what Eric said with the message, like if there's a message that resonates, that's cool. But otherwise, it's not something that necessarily is something I need.
I feel like if you have a good character conflict and the message like helps them and their arc fulfills that, then that's really important. Like, I don't think the message in a vacuum is what matters. Question 2. Should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with?
I think this is a very
topical,
but very interesting question because it very much depends how that is applied. And I've spent too much time in fandom spaces where that is applied in a way where it gives credence and a platform for toxic ideas and the type of hateful rhetoric that shouldn't actually be propagated. And it plays on this idea that you should always engage and treat equally ideas that you disagree with. And I think in that case, because I spend so much time in like toxic fandom spaces that do this badly, I don't think in those cases that you should be reading things that are hateful, that are hurtful, that go along like the homophobic, racist remarks, because that's the argument that they use to allow that to propagate. I don't think for things like that, where there are opinions that are hurtful, that they deserve to be read to the same degree as other opinions can be. There's definitely opinions out there that people disagree with that are not like that.
Yeah.
And yes, you should engage with those things.
But like some things are not equivalent and we don't want to make false equivalents.
Yeah. And
like that's like some things are fact. I don't need to read about someone who thinks just a fact that is demonstrably true is false. Like, you're just dumb. Yeah. But most people are reasonable, and reading about different experiences and points of view is valuable.
And very interesting. I read a lot of stuff in university that wasn't something that I would normally read and wasn't from my point of view or my opinion. That was very interesting, and I enjoyed reading that stuff.
Yep.
Question 3. As technology advances, what do you think will be the role of books?
Ooh, that is a very good question, because, you know, like who knows what tech is going to be in 15 years. Books ultimately are really probably not that popular overall, like compared with other forms of media, right? Like movies are much more popular. Video games are very popular, right?
Yeah.
But I think books are still going to stick around. Like audiobooks are probably going to get more and more popular, and we're going to get less and less physical books. That's probably true, which is sad because I like physical books. But books are an active thing, right? Like if you're reading, you're putting yourself into it. Like TV's very different, right? You can just be like, I'm just going to put on a thing and passively consume it. Video games are also very active in a way. Well, not every video game, but most video games, they require something of you, which is why I can sometimes have a really hard time reading if I'm like, I just have no energy to do anything, right? But books are a way for you to really see a perspective and be in something's head much more than you could in a visual medium, right? Movies and can't really do that nearly as well. Which is why book-to-film adaptations are kind of odd. But video games can help, but video games, I think, are better for, like, seeing interactive, like, branching stories. Like, I think that's really effective to see how, like, your decisions matter, where the book is just one story.
Yeah, I think that books will last. I don't think books will ever disappear. I think the way we consume books might be different.
Yes.
And
yes.
I am also a very physical reader, so I would love for physical books to stick around, but just knowing the sales from certain authors, like the physical books are the ones that sell the least.
Yeah.
And it's always the audiobooks and the ebooks that sell so much more. So what I think is that as technology progresses, we're going to find better ways to make books accessible.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing. But I do think the books are always going to be there in some shape or form. I don't think they're going to disappear at all.
Question 4. How important are summaries, review, and art in your book choosing?
This is a very different question for me now than it was before I started BookTube. Art, definitely. I will definitely buy a book off a pretty cover.
Same. I totally have.
I definitely have done that. I will still
them.
read the synopsis of it when I pick it up and need to like something in the synopsis. Generally.
Do you judge the first line of a book?
No, I will sometimes read the first chapter just to make sure it's written in a way that I can engage with.
Yeah.
But
I open to see how pithy the first line is, and I'm super judgy about that. It's also a good writing experience because I want to be a writer. So just like, ooh, what's the catchy line that they have? And the authors do it totally differently. It's really interesting.
In terms of reviews, I don't really read reviews about books before I read them. I do, of course, consume things on BookTube, though, and I do get book recommendations now through BookTube, and it's from people talking about books.
Those are kind of
in
reviews.
A way that are reviews.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't pick up a book and say, I need to go find reviews for this book before I read it. I'm just going to read the book.
Yeah, like if it's a book I never heard of that has a kick-ass cover and, you know, a kick-ass synopsis and a kick-ass first line and like there's an interesting map or something and the start, I'm like, oh, that seems pretty good. And like, oh, there's some cover quotes from people I kind of know or have heard of.
I never read those. I never even notice those.
Oh, I do. Yeah, that was funny. We went to the bookstore and you're like, this is really interesting. I'm like, oh, Brandon cover. This is a Brandon quote on it. It's like, oh, okay.
Quote. Oh, I didn't notice it. I just don't notice those things because that's the type of marketing that I don't care about, that like it doesn't give me anything helpful that some author has said something positive on this book where there's always going to be an author on the cover of a book saying something positive. So
yeah, I guess it's more that like, oh, if this is an author that you know of that who like a thing, then you might also like this thing, right? Like, I picked up Elantris, it's actually funny, purely off the name recognition of the Orson Scott Card cover quote, even though I had not read any Orson Scott Card, but I knew Ender's Game was a big deal. And also, I really like the synopsis. So, like, a cover quote alone is not going to do anything, but a cover quote is like, oh, that's kind of a cool cover. Yeah, all right, someone who's reasonably important likes this, and the back's cool. Like, all right, cool, I picked it up. And so I'm in the Brandon fandom now. So there you go.
It can work. It can work. Whereas,
I think the other ones are more important than the cover quote.
Yeah, like I was watching a video by Jen from Bookish Gems, I think, earlier today, where she was talking about cover quotes and saying how when things are compared to Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
That's
and it's just a thing to pull people in of, oh, this will be similar. And they're like not similar at all.
We have time, it's the next Game of Thrones. Not at all.
Not at all. I like book reviews from BookTube. I find them helpful to know what I should look at next. And I've got a pile of books I'm gunning to read from seeing people talk about them on BookTube because people get so into it and people put so much emotion into those reviews that I just can't get out of a written review. Like, I write my own written reviews, but they're mostly just so I remember what happened to the book.
Writing reviews is really weird, but like, if it's a series I like, I'm going to pick up the next book until until the author has written like several books in a row that I think are like, this is crap. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
Like, I'm going to read them. Like, a review's not going to sway my mind if I've been enjoying the series.
Yeah. It is fun to read reviews of books that you don't like sometimes.
That is very funny, yes.
Or if I finish a book and I didn't like the book, I'll go read the reviews and be like, oh yeah, all of these people say the same thing as me. I feel validated now.
Exactly.
Question number 5. Should one ever skim or scan a book?
I feel like I sort of do that. Like description's really hard for me to read. Like long action scenes, like my brain is not really absorbing a lot of it, which is probably my fast reading speed that just makes fun of me for.
I was thinking, like, skim or scan a book. Eric reads so fast. Does that count as skimming or scanning?
But I think it does, because I'm just like, all right, action. Yeah. You know, like, I sort of do that. I wouldn't say people should, like, skip viewpoints that they don't like. Like, that's probably not a good idea. But
I don't really care if people skim or scan their books. To me, this is very much a do what you want type thing. It's not something that I do. That's largely because I can't do it. I have tried practicing speed reading on some books before, and it sometimes does vaguely work, but I'm not good at that sort of stuff, so I just don't really do it. But if people want to, go for it. I'm not one to tell you no.
The important thing is that they're reading books.
Yeah. Yep.
Question 6. Should reading always be enjoyable?
I always read for enjoyment, so for me, reading should always be enjoyable. When I have to read something that I'm not going to enjoy, whether generally like an academic thing, I find it really hard to process what it is saying. Really, really hard. And I've gotten better at reading academic things over the years, but some of them are just so dense. And they're so hard to read, whereas at least other ones, they are more enjoyable. So for me, yes, reading should be enjoyable. I know for other people, there are people that are completely fine with reading not being enjoyable, and you do you.
I mean, nonfiction is very popular, right? Like,
Nonfiction doesn't have to be not enjoyable, though.
Sure. Yeah, but it might not be the enjoyment necessarily that they're reading it for. And so, I mean, I'm a math person. Always is a strong word. So no, but most of the time that I'm willingly giving my free time to, I'm usually reading for enjoyment. Like there are some situations where it's like, I'm not, but those are usually few and far between.
It also depends on what we're defining as enjoyment here. Because
what is enjoyment?
What is enjoyment? Because enjoyment doesn't have to be reading for pleasure. Enjoyment can be like reading an academic or a nonfiction book for the sake of getting information, and that can still be enjoyable.
Sure.
Yeah, enjoyment is such a broad term, and it seems so subjective now I think about
subjective.
It. Of what is enjoyable to read depends on the person.
That's probably why this is a good tag question.
Yeah, this is a very good tag question.
Because it's very subjective, and you learn a lot by a person, by how they answer.
Question number 7. Is it important to be well-read?
Depends what you're doing. I think writers should be reasonably well-read, so I should probably read more. But I mean, there's tons, like, go to a bookstore, there's tons of books that you haven't read. Like, there's just tons. Like, you literally cannot read everything, right? And there's always going to be people that's like, I read these 10 things, and I'm like, my to-be-read list is already way too big. I'm probably not going to read them.
Yeah.
So, but I would generally say that is useful, especially for a writer. But for a reader, I don't know, read what you want.
I have only really come across the idea of being well-read in the situation where people are being gatekeepy and talking about privilege. The privilege that they've had in their life to be able to read all these classics or all of these, like, things that you should definitely have read. So for me, I'm like,
yikes.
No, people don't have to be well-read because it's always been a negative connotation in my mind.
Yeah.
It's fine if other people want to use the phrase. I know that it doesn't mean that for everyone. I've watched enough of these videos to know that there are very vast different opinions about what being well-read actually means.
Yeah.
I know just
because I was thinking of it totally different than what you just said.
Just for me, I don't think about things as being well-read. I think people can just read what they like.
Yeah, some classics are good and are good character building that are not necessarily enjoyable. Like in college, I did actually enjoy reading a certain translation of the Odyssey. I thought that was really cool. Iliad, not so much. Iliad's fine, I guess. So, like, there are things that are good character building things, right? But I don't know, like, let's not be literature professors and just, like, I only read the classics and be very gatekeepy, because that's a little yikes. Like, you can have fun.
And there's a lot of gatekeeping that can very easily come out of very different parts of the book community, and it can come back to what people define as being well-read for that specific part of the community. Like, it can come up in science fiction fantasy as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you haven't read The Wheel of Time? You haven't read Brandon Sanderson? Like, those types of things as well. So, yeah. I think people can just read what they want.
Yeah.
And I think that should be enough.
I agree. Question 8. What is your book buying process?
I scan a shelf very briefly until something catches my eye, and then I pull it out and I buy it. That's generally it. It can be in a second-hand shop. It can be in a bookshop.
Yeah.
I very rarely buy things online because I like I like doing it physically and buying things physically. But even though I've got my TBR, I don't specifically go out looking for those books generally unless it's a sequel to something I've read and I want to read the next book. I will just have them and vaguely remember them. And then I'll go to the bookstore and go, hey, I know that book. I remember that book. And this is what happened last night when we went to the bookstore as well. Yes. And I kept putting out books. I'm like, I've heard of this book. And that is how I buy books.
Yes. I'm similar. Like, I go and either I notice something that looks cool and I'm like, oh, nice. Because I think we when we went to a bookstore in Australia. That was Broken Earth, right? We saw that and it's like, oh, that looks very cool. And I've heard of N.K. Jemisin. So it's like, oh, wow, that is quite the back cover. That is cool.
And then I bought it and then I read it.
And then
and
you read
it was
it.
fantastic.
Other things I'm just like, oh, I've heard of, and buy them. Although usually what I do is I go to a bookstore, check for Brandon Sanderson things. And if I don't have this certain edition, then I buy it.
That too. I definitely am tempted to buy things multiple times sometimes if I like the covers of something, because I get very drawn in by covers, and there are certain series I'm like, I'm going to buy all of these for aesthetic purposes one day.
Yep.
Question number 9. What is your reading process?
What's a reading process? I 1, find time. Good luck. 2, sit in a chair with my iPad, read them. I haven't actually read physical books in a while. I like having them, but I don't read them. I've really taken to reading on my iPad. I read for a Stormlight reread. I read the first 2 books on my phone. I read the whole thing. It was just sitting on the couch and just being on my phone. It was nice. I like the iPad a lot. I almost want an iPad mini solely to read, which is not worth the money.
He wants an iPad mini to be an e-reader.
I can do other things. That's nice.
But would you use it for other things?
Yeah, maybe. Doesn't have a high refresh rate screen, though, Apple. Get on that.
I read physical books in a variety of different locations, so
you do? Yes, many locations.
Choose which book out of the several books I'm reading I wish to read at any given point, go to location, sit in a variety of weird poses, sometimes with my cats, and read books. That's my reading process.
We literally got these big comfy chairs solely so you could read curled up into a ball. They're enormous chairs. Like, we can sit right next to each other. We thought we were going to be able to do videos next to each other, but that ended up being like...
Yeah, we were like a little bit too close.
This is cute, but like, it's not a natural place in a widescreen video.
Also probably a little bit too much for like 20 minutes of recording.
Yes, 20. Question 10. How do you use what you read?
I mostly read fantasy, so I feel like this question is more for people who do a lot of nonfiction.
Yeah.
And Brandon's channel is a lot of nonfiction, a lot of philosophy type stuff. So that's got a lot more practical uses than me reading fantasy and just doing escapism. So there's probably some stuff that I get out of it. I mean, I joined a fandom and am on the staff of the Coppermind Wiki and the 17 Sharp fandom. Got myself a husband.
Hello.
So I guess I used it that way.
Yes. That's why we have a lot of Brandon Sanderson books in the background. Use what I've read, only nonfiction that's like directly useful. I don't know. I don't really have anything to add to that.
I've read a lot of scientific papers that were useful at the time for me learning.
Yeah.
Question 11. If you could download a book to your brain, would you still read?
That kind of depends on the specifics and how the technology works, which I know is a very nerdy way to go about it. What does it mean to download a book into your brain?
It's just download it into your brain like you download on the computer. And then it's just there in your downloads folder.
Yeah, but like, what do I do when I'm accessing the book in my brain?
I don't know. That's your choice.
Like, is that
this
reading?
This is your mind palace.
I don't know. Not enough information to answer that question.
I would definitely still read. I would also take the option to download things into my brain, because I would split these between the things that I'm reading for pleasure and the things that I have to read. And those things, I'd gladly just download that into my brain and then I just know it. Whereas, like, I enjoy the process of reading as well, so I would 100% still actually read.
Sure. That's a better answer. Question 12. What are your views on rereading a book?
I am a chronic rereader. Until, like, a year ago, I didn't read new things. I just read the same things over and over again. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I like rereading. I wouldn't... See, the thing is I don't have enough time to read a lot of things. Honestly, time is very precious. So I am usually reading new things. Not that I don't want to read old things that I really enjoyed. Like, I do really enjoy rereading good books that I know that I really like. And it is always interesting seeing, like, oh, I know the ending, so, I catch those things. It's fun.
Question 13. What makes a book good?
Oh boy, so many things. That is a topic of an entire video that we could do, I'm sure. But I think you want both the characters, plots, and mysteries to all intertwine together into one cohesive whole with a sweet ending. To me, I don't particularly love open-ended endings, though they can be good, but they can be really bad. They can be awful. But I like a good ending that wraps up at least the main story thread.
Yeah.
Effectively.
I would definitely agree with that. Even if it's got a sequel or is in a trilogy, I think that each book story should be mostly resolved within that book before the tendrils are pushed into the next book and not just left open. But I think that a good book needs solid characters.
Yes.
I think if you don't have solid characters that people can get behind and care about, then it's a really hard book to get into.
I think the best books have great characters and great character conflicts, and the resolution of those makes for the really big highs in a book. So like Oathbringer and Rhythm of War and Words of Radiance, like all of those. Really every Stormlight book, really. But Oathbringer especially is probably one of, I think maybe my favorite book. Maybe just because it connects the plot with Dalinar's character in such a great way and entwines it so great. And I dig that. I dig that so much. I'm just like, wow, I just admire the structure of this book. Oh, look how clever Brandon is. Some people think there's a lot of filler in that, which I totally disagree. I think that is an excellently crafted book. Ooh, question 14. What makes a book bad? Oh, boy.
Well, we've already touched on how open endings can be bad.
Can be. Not guaranteed. But
I would say if you have uneven pacing, that's really clunky.
It's boring. Like, you can hate read something and be like, wow, I hate this. But boredom, that's just a book you're putting down and DNFing and never reading ever again. And you're just like, why do I care? I don't care.
You can enjoy something that you hate read.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
That is totally doable.
Yeah, but like boring and just like you feel nothing. Like every page is just blah.
When it feels like a slog to get through and you just don't know where that slug is going to end, or even if it's worth getting past, or even if you do know it's worth getting past, but you just have to keep going through it. That is exhausting. And it's not enjoyable exhausting. Like, I don't want to keep doing this for a potential better time later.
A bad ending as well. Like, a bad ending, I can love a book, but the ending sucked. And I'm like, no, I didn't like the book. Even if I love 95% of it. It's just like, you missed the landing. That means it's a bad flight. This is like, I'm sorry. Like, that landing part's really important.
I may be a little bit more forgiving with, like, not sticking the landing.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Yeah, it'll make or break a book for you.
Yes, absolutely.
But a really good ending can make a book. It can make a book much better.
Yes.
Even if the rest of the book has just been
if it's kind of a slog.
Meh.
Yeah. And then like it really elevates. It's like, I like the book.
Yeah. It can save a book.
Yeah.
Question 15. How do you feel about not finishing a book?
I do this frequently. Honestly, like, books really need to grab me, because if not, I'm putting it down and probably never reading it again. I distinctly remember reading Name of the Wind and just being bored out of my mind. Like, it's just really hard for me to get into new things, right? And that book starts really slow, and I'm like, I don't care. And I think if I read 2 more pages, like the second time I read it, I'm like, now I'm interested. Like, literally, like 2 pages later, I would have just continued through the whole book. So either I am into the book in the beginning and finishing the book in like a sitting or two. So I guess that's kind of reading process that like I binge read and then I'm done reading and then I do something else for a week. Like I don't read a little bit each day. I am reading today. Your beginning has to be interesting. Like, why do I care to read it? Or intriguing, at least. Like, it doesn't have to be action-packed. It just needs to be intriguing.
I'm totally fine with DNFing a book.
Yeah.
And I think that it is a healthy habit to have. If you're not enjoying something and you don't have to read it, then you can use that time to read something else.
Like, this isn't like watching a bad movie. A movie's like 2 hours. Or 3 max, right? Like,
this is more.
Yeah, reading a book's way more. Like a bad video game, like if the video game sucks, you just put it down. Like a book's exactly the same way. Like it just is so much time. You're not going to spend 20 to 30 hours in a game if the game sucks. Sure, if you're reviewing it, you should probably finish it.
I would disagree with that. At least on
depends.
BookTube, I think it's totally fine for like people on BookTube to not finish a book if they're not enjoying it, because that is the review, right?
True. I think it's like, yeah, it's a bit tricky. Like if you're a journalist writing a review, you should read the book.
I think
right?
That's very different.
Sure. No, I totally agree. That's
like a professional setting.
Yeah. And if they don't finish the thing, then I'm like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. So I don't like that, right?
I mean, if they don't finish a thing, I think that's very telling about the thing.
Yeah. I think if you're honest and upfront that I DNF'd the book, then like I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Even more telling, perhaps, is if you finish it, I'm like, wow, I wish I DNF'd it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I finished a book the other day that I regret finishing.
Yeah.
I could have used my time more wisely.
Rip.
Yeah.
Question 16. Should the author's personal life matter at all?
I think yes, it should, because if I'm paying money to someone and funding their life and they're doing shitty things, then I don't think I should be giving money to them. I think that line is very different for every single person in every single scenario with every single author.
Yes.
And it can be that for one person, they're not comfortable giving money to X author because of Y thing, but another person is. And I think that is fine.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to find their own limits for it. I don't think that authors have immunity over their life and when they are in the public eye and they are putting out a product and people are giving them money for it.
Like a few examples that come to mind is like Terry Goodkind, not great, not buying his books. Like I'm just not, or like, if someone says, I can't reread Harry Potter because of J.K. Rowling, I think that's a totally reasonable thing.
Yeah. The other thing for me is that if there is an author I have not read who has done something shitty, then I just have no desire to pick up their books to begin with.
Yeah.
I just don't want to because there's nothing there for me now.
Are people watching reruns of The Cosby Show anymore? Probably someone is, but probably not most people. I never watched The Cosby Show. But, you know, it's exactly that sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Question 17. If you could only read one genre for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I mean, it's obviously fantasy. Fantasy lets you do everything and also have dragons.
Yeah.
If you can have romance, you can have romance in fantasy. Do you want to have something that means a lot? Yeah, sure, you can also do it. It lets you do everything.
Yeah, fantasy is kind of like YA, where you can have every other genre within it. Except fantasy, you also have magic.
Yeah. So. And you can have varying levels of it. Fantasy is the father of all genres, which is why basically the old myth stories, right? Iliad, Odyssey, basically fantasy stories. Question 18. Do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it?
Yeah, I've definitely read books without knowing things about them. Like, I'll pick something up off the shelf and it just has a pretty cover, so I will read that book.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I do struggle sometimes getting into a book that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
Because then if the book doesn't hook me straight away and I can't find the plot, then it's really hard for me to continue because I'm just kind of floundering around in this story, having no idea what's going on. And at that point, what I'll do is I'll go and read the synopsis again, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. Same. I can't say I do this a lot, though.
I did that with The Sandman because the art on Audible was, like, fantastic.
Yeah.
And I had heard such good things about it, and I listened to the first chapter of it and had no idea what was going on, and then got halfway through the second one, still had no idea what was going on, and had to go back and reread the synopsis. And then I realized like the basic premise, and it helped so much. Unfortunately, I then stopped reading the book because it terrified me.
Yeah, which I think is a great reason to do that.
Question 19. What author, genre, series, or culture can you just not get into, and why?
I don't know if I read enough to actually answer that question really well. What about you?
I'm trying to get into romance, but it's not working so well so far. I think, I think that I like romances, but I like them as part of a story, not as the whole story.
The B plot, not the A plot.
My 2022 resolution for reading more romance is going so very well, considering it is not even 2022 yet, and I'm already floundering on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also agree, but I mean, I can't say I even pick those books up, so it's like...
Like, I don't read outside of fantasy and sci-fi, and the thing is, I don't really have much of a desire to do so.
Same.
Because I can get things like mysteries kind of sound interesting, but not enough for me to want to just read a mystery by itself.
Unless it was like really like someone told me, I was like, this is why you should read it. Like, I'd need a really good pitch.
Yeah, I need a really good recommendation. Or things like horror. Like, I am interested in trying more horror books, but also the ones that I want to read of, like, Stephen King are also his fantasy horror.
Yeah, right.
I just
have that. Horror is an interesting intersection of those.
So there's just so many different things out there that I just don't read.
Yep.
And it's not that I don't want to read them. I just have no desire to necessarily gravitate that way.
Yeah.
Like, classics are another one. I just have no desire to read classics. Like, I know that they're fine. I know a lot of people like them. They're just not something that I'm interested in.
I need to be getting some college credit to do that. And last one. Do you think everyone should read? Why?
I think everyone should do what they want to do. And if people don't want to read, then that's very much their choice. I think that there is a lot people can get out of reading, but there's also a lot of other things in life, and you do have to divvy up your time. And I like to devote my time to reading, but I know there are other people out there who would prefer to devote that time to something else instead of reading. So I think reading is great. I highly encourage it to people, but at the same time, I think people should read as much or as little as they want.
Yeah, generally, yes. For regular people, I would agree. For people in, like, the public eye, like, especially, like, leaders and stuff, you should probably know what you're talking about and be reasonably well read. But for, like, general people, do what you want. Do what makes you happy. Life's short.
Well, that is all the questions, everybody. I hope you had a good time.
Yes.
I know, I definitely did. It was very fun doing this with someone else.
Yes.
This was a particular tag that I thought would be very fun with two people to bounce ideas off.
Yes, agreed.
So, yeah. Thank you for joining me, Eric.
Love you, darling.
Love you too. Thank you for joining. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye.